Hello, friends. We all know that there are different processes which are continuously taking place on the earth, and these processes may be physical, chemical, or biological or biochemical processes, of which the one of the biochemical process, which is very important as far as the living organisms are concerned, in which the energy flow is maintained. Uh, Today we are talking about the photosynthesis. We know that the sun is the ultimate source of the energy on the earth, as far as the living organisms are concerned. It is the only source of the energy on the earth. And this energy flow is maintained by particular organisms which are having ability, which are having capacity to trap the solar energy and to convert that solar energy into the chemical form. And this form of the energy, which is utilized by all living organisms for getting the energy, usable form of the energy, isn't it? All living organisms, they are dependent on the sun, either directly or indirectly, for fulfilling their need of the energy. Why I told you that directly or indirectly. So the organisms which are directly depend upon the sun to fulfill the need of the energy, those organisms are called as autotrophs. And those organisms which are autotrophs are able to convert the solar energy. It means that the energy which is coming from the sun, they are able to convert the solar energy into the chemical energy. And there are some other organisms which cannot convert that solar energy into the chemical energy directly. So these organisms are dependent upon these autotrophs, isn't it? And all the organisms which are dependent on the autotrophs, and some heterotrophic organisms are also there. So these are not having ability to convert the solar energy into the what we call it as the chemical energy. And this is how the energy flow is maintained on the earth. It means that the energy coming from the sun, it will be received by the autotrophs. Then from autotrophs, it will be converted into the chemical energy, and that energy is then again transferred to some other organisms like human beings or like other animals which are not ability to convert that solar energy into the chemical energy. So these organisms are dependent upon the autotrophs for getting the energy. And from these heterotrophs, the energy is again converted into the carnivorous animals. And from these animals, then after decomposition of the bodies, their bodies, this energy is then transferred into the soil, and there are different cycles. That is geological cycles, what we call that the carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, sulfur cycle, all different elementary cycles are there, and through which this flow is maintained, and these elements are in transfer, isn't it? So today we are going to discuss about this process of the in which the solar energy is trapped and it is converted into the chemical energy, and the name of that process is what we call it as the photosynthesis. Okay, so this photosynthesis is a very important process which actually takes place in a specific type of the organisms, isn't it? And these organisms are called as autotrophs. Okay, these organisms are green, and these organisms contain specific apparatus in which this process, whole process, or most of the reactions of this process are completed, and later on the energy it is converted, that solar energy it is converted into the chemical energy. And this process in which the solar energy is converted into the chemical energy is we call it as a photosynthesis process. Today we are going to discuss about this photosynthesis and the apparatus in which the photosynthesis process is going on. Okay, now the photosynthesis process, no doubt, in this process the solar energy is used, but the another component which are used in this process, these components are used as a raw material, and these are carbon dioxide and the water molecule. We know this carbon dioxide and water molecules, these are abundantly found on the earth, and these are water is also present in the soil, isn't it? So by using these components, these are raw materials, plants synthesize their food material, getting it. uh, can you believe what amount of the carbon dioxide it would be utilized by the plant yearly, isn't it? So this is very important because the amount of the carbon dioxide, when it increases in the atmosphere, the concentration of the carbon dioxide, when it is increased in the atmosphere, it will create a problem, isn't it? And we all know that the greenhouse effect and all other problems are there. Okay, certain health problems are also there. So the photosynthesis is that process by which this balance between by which the balance between the carbon and oxygen. Okay, carbon oxygen cycles are maintained by this process, and near about 200 billion tons of the carbon it is removed from the atmosphere by this only process, what we call it as a photosynthesis process. So you think how this process is important for all of us, isn't it? So this is the process by which the atmospheric or CO2 it is utilized by the autotrophic organisms, and CO2 and water it is utilized as a raw material by light energy, or by this sorry autotropic organism. And in addition to that, the light energy is also utilized, and that light energy it is utilized to make the food material that is called as the sugar, isn't it? In this process, uh, evolution of O2, that is oxygen, it is also takes place. And this evolution of O2, because of this process, the concentration of the oxygen in the atmosphere is increased. Are you getting it? So, how this process is important, you know that this carbon dioxide is removed out from the atmosphere. Oxygen, it is going to be added into the atmosphere. Light energy, it is converted into the chemical energy, and that chemical energy it becomes available for all living world, isn't it, on the earth. So this process is very, very important. Biological process, this biochemical process is very, very important as far as the energy flow in the living organism is concerned. And this process it occurs in the green plants, all green plants, algae, and some prokaryotic organisms as well, isn't it? The prokaryotic organisms which contain these photosynthetic pigments. In these prokaryotic organisms, this process of the photosynthesis it is taking place. It is going on. Okay, this process we call it as a endergonic process. Why it is called as a endergonic process? Because this process is energy requiring process. In this process, energy is conserved, isn't it? As we discussed that the solar energy it is trapped, and the energy it is conserved, and this conservation of energy it is done in the form of the synthesis of the carbohydrate, that is glucose. Okay, so this is the endergonic process, energy conserving process, or energy storing process. This photosynthesis process is also called as anabolic process. Why we call it as anabolic? Because small molecules combines. Which molecules are combined here? Carbon dioxide is going to be combined. A water molecule it is going to be combined. So carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, these atoms are going to be combined to form a complex molecule that is called as a C6H12O6, what we call it as a sugar. Okay, which is monomer, which is subunit for the synthesis of all other or many other carbohydrates. Okay, they may be polysaccharide, they may be disaccharide, or they may be heteropolysaccharide, or oligosaccharide, whatever it may be. Okay, so this process is anabolic process in which the different molecules, or the what you call that, the different atoms are joined to form the carbohydrates, isn't it? And the carbohydrates which are synthesized in this process, some of the carbohydrates, some of the sugar molecules, these are utilized to fulfill the needs of that particular organism, particular autotroph, particular plant, isn't it? Or that particular algae or prokaryote. Okay, but in some plants, or in most of the plants, the rest of the carbohydrate which is synthesized in excess amount, that carbohydrate it is stored in different parts, isn't it? It means that the excess of the food material which is synthesized in the process of the photosynthesis, that food material is synthesized in the different parts of the plants. It may be root, it may be a stem, or it may be leaves, or it may be uh, fruits or seeds as well, isn't it? So this excess food material it is synthesized, and this food material, okay, it is a result of the process of the photosynthesis, and which food material later on it is utilized by different types of the organisms. This is the overall reaction. You might have to remember this reaction, isn't it? So the photosynthetic overall photosynthesis reaction is C6H12O6 plus that it represents as a light energy Hv. It gives rise to C6 H12O6, that is the 6CO2 plus 12H2O plus light gives rise to C6H12O6 plus O2, that oxygen gas which is evolved, and plus 6H2O atoms. Okay, here this whole process it is completed, very very importantly, it is completed in the presence of sunlight and another molecule which is also required to complete this process. Without presence of what this process could not be completed, that molecule is called as chlorophyll molecule. And this is the reason, the presence of the chlorophyll and absence of the chlorophyll. The presence of the chlorophyll, it makes the that particular organism as autotrophic. If the chlorophylls are absent in the organism, that particular organism it may be heterotrophic. Okay, so now you can see here the oxygen which is going to be evolved in this process. That oxygen is a photosynthetic, and this is the reaction 6 CO2. Again you can see that this oxygen then it is evolved in this reaction, and it enters, or it goes to the atmosphere. Okay, so this is the overall reaction, this photosynthesis process. This photosynthesis process, as we discussed, that it requires H2O, CO2, light energy, and more importantly, this chlorophyll molecule. And this reaction in which the H2O and chlorophylls are utilized to evolve the O2, this all component, this all the series of the reaction in which the H2O and chlorophylls are utilized in the presence of sunlight, the oxygen is evolved. This is the first part of the photosynthetic reaction or photosynthesis process, and this reaction is called as light reaction. So overall, the photosynthesis process it is classified into two types of the reaction. The first is the light reaction, and the another one is a dark reaction. In light reaction, H2O molecule it is utilized, isn't it, by the plants, and in the presence of the H2O and light, chlorophyll molecule it transports its electron to different electron acceptors, and it forms the ATP and NADPH2. Okay, so these ATP and NADPH2, these are the products of the first reaction of the photosynthesis, what we call it as a light reaction. Are you getting it? And in this reaction, oxygen is evolved. So what is going on in the first part of the photosynthesis? In the first part of the photosynthesis, the solar energy is trapped by the chlorophyll pigment. At the same time, the photolysis of the water takes place, and the water from water oxygen is evolved, and the electrons are transported in this process to the different electron acceptors, and ATP and NADPH2 are generated. And this ATP and NADPH2 is the product of the first step, which are later on utilized in the dark reaction. So by utilizing this ATP and NADPH2 in the dark reaction, the CO2 assimilation takes place, assimilation of the CO2 takes place. So the CO2 is the raw material which is going to be utilized by the plant in the dark reaction in second half is of the photosynthesis. So this by using the CO2, ATP and NADPH2 which are formed in the light reaction, the uh, the dark reaction in the dark reaction the carbon assimilation takes place which results into the formation of sugar. So in short the photosynthesis process, it is completed into two parts: the light reaction, in which the ATP and NADPH2 are formed with evolution of O2 and by utilizing the H2O and light energy. The another one is the dark reaction, in which the ATP and NADPH2, which are formed in the light reaction, these are utilized for the assimilation of the carbon, isn't it? For the fixation of the carbon, and the this dark reaction ends with the formation of the sugar molecule, what we call it as a chemical energy. So this is the overall reaction of the photosynthesis. Okay, now where actually this photosynthesis process takes place. Photosynthesis, as we discussed, that the photosynthesis takes place in some prokaryotic organisms. Like prokaryotic have both oxygenic and unoxygenic. Okay, so the unoxygenic and oxygenic prokaryotics are there. uh, in both of the prokaryotes, this photosynthesis process takes place. The prokaryotes which contains or which possess this molecule, and which are called as the bacteriochlorophylls. Okay, so the bacteria which are having the bacteriochlorophyll A, B, C. So those bacteria can perform the process of the photosynthesis. Certain chemosynthetic bacteria. Now the cyanobacteria have oxygenics. Okay, among them the cyanobacteria. These cyanobacteria are oxygenic bacteria, and in which the photosynthesis takes place on the thylakoids from the plasma membrane. The cyanobacteria, what we call it as the blue-green algae. Okay, blue-green algae. The cyanobacteria are source of the eukaryotic photosynthesis. Okay, so uh, these cyanobacteria later on they might be parasitized. We will discuss later while discussing the what we call it as the photosynthetic apparatus. Okay, now the eukaryotes. Okay, in eukaryotes, only oxygenic eukaryotes in which the photosynthesis process takes place, and oxygenic eukaryotes means all green plants, particularly. Okay, so this photosynthesis process, it takes place in plants or in oxygenic eukaryotes. That the site in which or at which the photosynthesis process takes place, the site of the photosynthesis, it is a chloroplast. So all green plants, all oxygenic eukaryotes, particularly green plants, they possess the plastid. The plastids are of different types, and so, leucoplast, and some chromoplast are also there. Among chromoplast, the chloroplast is a very important plastid type of the plastid, and that chloroplast which possess the chlorophylls or the green pigments in more amount. So this is the site of the photosynthesis actually. Okay, so what is the site of the photosynthesis then? The photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplast. What I discussed earlier. Okay, so the chloroplast is a type of plastid, isn't it? It is a type of organelle, and it is found to be present in certain plants. Okay, or most of the plants, eukaryotic plants. Okay, and this chloroplast, which is present in organelle plants, carry out the photosynthesis process very successfully. In plants, particularly, these are found in the leaves, and how these leaves are having most chloroplast. But some herbaceous plants, the stem of these herbaceous plants, it is also having the chloroplast. Okay, the green color to the chloroplast or to the leaves or this particular stem, it is because of the presence of a well-known pigment, green-colored pigment, isn't it? That is called as the chlorophyll, isn't it? So, how plants gets that green color? The plants gets the green color because of the presence of this particular type of the pigment. That pigment is called as the chlorophyll, and there are different types of the chlorophyll: chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, chlorophyll C, chlorophyll D, and so on. Okay. Now, the pigments, these pigments actually absorb the light energy, and these pigments are very, very important for absorbing the light energy in the form of the photons. Okay. Now, you can see this is the structure of the chloroplast. Are you getting it? The structure of the chloroplast. You can see here the leaf is there. From leaf, plant cell is showing there. That plant cell having the big vacuole at the center and having a nucleus at one corner and having a very small minute structures, many structures which are found to be present in the cell. These structures are nothing but the chloroplast. Okay, and you can see this chloroplast. It is bounded by two membrane. This structure you can see here. The two membranes are there, and these are two membrane structure. What we call the chloroplast. That each membrane of the chloroplast, it is a lipid bilayer structure. Okay, so these two membrane structure having certain transporter proteins for the entry and exit of certain molecules. Okay, and this chloroplast, it contains the semi-solid structure, semi-solid structure, which is composed of different types of the enzymes, different types of the proteins. Some ribosomes are also found to be present. So all three types of the RNA molecules are also found to be present in the chloroplast, and the circular DNA molecule, it is also found to be present in the chloroplast. Are you getting it? So apart from that, the unit, photosynthetic unit, yeah, in this photosynthetic unit, there exists this structure which is made up of the empty sac like component. Okay, and what we call it as a thylakoid. So that structure, which is formed by many thylakoids. These thylakoids are placed one after another. These are disc shaped structure. What we call it is the thylakoid disc, and these thylakoids, when placed one after another, one after another, one after another, uh, which are connected to each other or to its neighboring thylakoid, but that stack is called as a granum. Okay, so the stack of the thylakoid, okay, which is just like as that of the stack of the coins. So the stack of the coin, each coin, we consider it as a thylakoid. So such type of the thylakoids are present in a row, in a stack, and the structure is called as a granum. So such type of the granum, many granum molecules, sorry, many granum structures are found to be present in a single chloroplast, and these granum are connected with each other by the lamella, isn't it? What we call it is thylakoid membrane and thylakoid lamella. Okay, interlamella. What we call it is a interlamella. So these structures are found to be present in the chloroplast, isn't it? Now, this semi-solid component, semi-solids, what we call it, the fluid of the chloroplast is called as stroma, in which many components are present. In the stroma, we can find the DNA, circular DNA molecule. In stroma, we can find the all three types of the RNA molecules in stroma. There is exist the granules, what we call that ribosomes. In stroma, there exists the granum, GRNM granum, which are made up of numerous thylakoids, and these granum molecules are connected with each other, isn't it? So this is the structure of the what we call it. You can see this is the electron micrograph of the thylakoid. Sorry, this is the electron micrograph of the chloroplast, and you can see here. This view is taken under the what we call that the electron microscope, and how the actually the chloroplast looks like in the electron microscope. Okay, so all these are the dark colored stack like structures. These are the granum. Are you getting it? And which are interconnected with each other. So this is the chloroplast morphology. The as we discussed here, the morphology of the chloroplast, it contains, it is made up of two membranes, inner membrane, outer membrane. Then it is also having the thylakoid, the stack of the thylakoid, what we call it as a granum, and the granum, it is connected with each other, and whole this component is found to be present in the stroma. Okay, and This content is covered up by the membrane of the chloroplast, that is a inner membrane firstly, and later on the outer membrane. Okay, so you can see here, this is the granum, and this one is the thylakoid. Okay, so now this light, we what we are discussing about the light, which type of the light is then trapped out by the these molecules, what we call that, the chlorophyll molecules. Now we will discuss in detail about this chlorophyll, but till now you remember that this light it is composed of different or many particles, and what we call that particles are called as the photons, isn't it? So light behaves like waves. Light, it behaves like a waves, and it can be described in the wavelength and the frequencies. Only a small portion of the light, that is called as the electromagnetic spectrum, it is used for the photosynthesis. So this is the light. What type of the lights are there, or what type of the source of energy it is there? Okay, now in this you can say, as the wavelength of the light it decreases, as the wavelength of the light it decreases, the it contains more amount of the energy. Okay, and as the wavelength of light it increases, that light possesses less amount of the energy, isn't it? So there are different types of the electromagnetic waves or radiations. The electromagnetic radiations which are very having very low wavelength, these are gamma rays, x-rays, ultraviolet rays as well. Okay, but the spectrum which is used in the process of the photosynthesis, that spectrum is a spectrum of visible light. Okay, what is that? The visible light. And visible light, it contains or it ranges from 360 to 700 nanometer wavelength. Okay, up to 720 or more than 700, but it is less than 750. So this light, it is actually used in the process of the photosynthesis. Okay, and the light, it is starting from there are 7 different colors of the light. Hmm? What we call the hugor, violet, indigo, and then blue, and green, and so on. Okay, so this spectrum of the light, it is utilized in the process of photosynthesis by the plant. It is trapped by the plant. Okay, particularly the photosynthetic pigment. Okay, so these are the available radiations. Um, how many types of the radiations are there? There are different types of the radiations, and these types of the radiations are based on their wavelength. Okay, so as the wavelength of the light increases, the energy of the light, energy from that light, it is, it will be less, and as the wavelength of the light it decreases, the energy from that light it will be more higher. Okay, so gamma rays having a higher energy, very high energy, which could not be tolerated by the plant. Okay, X-ray, ultraviolet rays also even could not be tolerated by the plant. There could be damage to the chlorophyll and all other what we call that molecules to the plant. Okay, molecules of the plant. Okay, so the only usable form of the light is a light of visible spectrum. Okay, and which is having, this is the these are the different colors of the light, and this light is utilized by the process of photosynthesis. Afterwards the infrared rays are also there, then radar and short waves, all these are the waves are there, but this light is, this electromagnetic form of the light, it is not also utilized for the by the plant for the process of the photosynthesis. Okay, so pigments. Now we are talking about the pigments. The photosynthesis, in the this process, different types of the pigments are involved. Not only the chlorophyll, the pigments in which the or the, where exactly these pigments are present. The pigments are present in the thylakoid. Again, is in the membranes of the thylakoid, upper membrane of the thylakoid. Okay, so these pigments are light absorbing molecule, and these are associated with the thylakoid membrane. So the pigments are found to be present in the thylakoid. And these pigments are of three main types. And what are these types of the pigments? The types of the pigments are chlorophylls, then carotenoids, and phycobilins. Okay, so what are these chlorophylls? The chlorophylls are those important type of the pigment which are found to be present in the membrane, thylakoid membrane particularly. Uh, these pigments are actually involved in the trapping the light, isn't it? And these are found in all green plants in different proportion, isn't it? Their proportion is different. Okay, so these chlorophylls are having different types: chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, chlorophyll C, chlorophyll D, chlorophyll E. Apart from that, bacteria also possess these chlorophyll pigments, and in bacteria these are exist in the form of bacteriochlorophyll A, bacteriochlorophyll B, C, D, E, isn't it? And the structure, if you are talking, we will discuss later about the structure of the pigment. The another type of the pigments which are found to be present in these plants, these are carotenoids. Okay, and these carotenoids are main type of the carotenoid, it is a beta carotene. Okay, so the carotene, beta carotene, it is a carotenoid type of the pigment. So carotenoids are of two types: the carotenes and xanthophylls. These two types of the pigments are present in carotenoids. And phycobilins. Okay, the phycobilins, these are pigments which are not mostly found to be present in the plants, but these are found to be present in certain different bacteria. Okay, now you see this is the structure of the chlorophyll molecule. Okay, only the difference here in the structure is that the chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B is that in chlorophyll A, there is a methyl group, whereas in chlorophyll B, this methyl group is replaced by aldehyde group, that is CHO group. Okay, you can see here this methyl group, it is attached to one of the ring. Okay, so this chlorophyll molecule, it is made up of two main parts. Okay, what are the parts of the chlorophyll? The head and tail. The head, what we call it is the porphyrin head and phytal tail. So this chlorophyll molecule, this porphyrin head and phytal tail, this chlorophyll molecule, it is a made up of four types of the pyrrole rings. And these four types of the pyrrole rings or four pyrrole rings, these four pyrrole rings form the porphyrin head, which is a hydro what we call it as the hydrophobic. Okay, this hydro sorry hydrophilic head, this porphyrin head is a hydrophilic, and this tail is a hydrophobic. So this porphyrin head, which is made up of four pyrrole rings, these rings are nitrogen containing rings. Here each ring contains one nitrogen atom, and this nitrogen atom at of four rings, these nitrogen atoms are joined to the centrally placed, what we call it as a magnesium atom. So each chlorophyll molecule, it is made up of four pyrrole rings. These four pyrrole rings contain the nitrogen, and these four pyrrole rings are joined to the centrally placed magnesium atom, which forms the head of the chlorophyll molecule, and that head of the chlorophyll molecule is called as the porphyrin head. Are you getting it? And later on, there is a phytal tail. Okay, so porphyrin ring, or what we call the porphyrin head. Later on, there is a phytal tail. The phytal tail, it is a carbon chain, and this carbon chain is another part, and it is joined to the one of the what we call it as the pyrrole ring. So this is the structure of the what we call it as a chlorophyll molecules, and which are very very important, which are actively participate, which are actively involved in the process of the what we call it as a photosynthesis. And here later on in the next lecture, we will discuss about the other types of the pigments in detail. uh, uh, and we will also discuss about the uh, what we call it as the some part of the light reaction, And then in light reaction there are further processes, that is cyclic and non-cyclic. We will all discuss about in our next lecture. Thank you very much.